if we want to design an optimized environment for the sow, I think we have to ask some initial questions. First of all, we need to know what kind of animal or biological system we are designing this environment for, and what are the basic behavioral needs of the sow at farrowing, and how can we stimulate her to become a good mother. That's two of the first central questions we have to answer. Another one is, how can we create an environment where the sow is confident, relaxed, and attentive towards her young. We know that labor cost is increasing in many countries, so the best option is that we stimulate the sow to become as good mother as possible, so that the farmer do not have to assist too many farrowings, although we do recommend the farmer to be present at farrowings, but the more of the work the sow can do, the better it is. We also need to know what factors are important for the farmer to have good working conditions and a good relationship to his pigs, especially when we are going from created sows to loose housing, because maternal traits and maternal behavioral traits has much more impact in those systems than in the crate system. And if you look at the main factors affecting piglet mortality, what are the factors that impact the most are actually the sow material and the sow maternal behavior. And the second one is the work of the farmer, or the management, and the routines that the farmer have in the farm. And third, I would say, comes the pen, or the design of the pen. I will get into more details about that. Let's first look at the fundamental decisions about reproduction, because we need to know about those biological mechanisms to be able to create an environment that satisfies the behavioral needs of the sow and her litter. So there are two fundamental decisions about reproduction. The first one is how much of the resources available to them should be spent on reproduction instead of their own continued growth and survival. We know that the sows in their first parity still have a lot of growth, they are still growing. So the question is, how much of the resources are they going to use on own growth and development versus how much are they going to invest in their first litter? Another question is, how do they divide the resources that they allocate to reproduction among their offspring? And we do know that if we look at trade-offs between current and future litters, we can see that each reproductive effort as a biological system is associated with a cost in terms of reduced future survival rate and fecundity. So the question is, how does the domestic sow fit into this picture? Well, in fact, we see that they fit quite well into this picture. First of all, sows produce more offspring than normally raised, and pigs fit the pattern of facultative siblicid from biology and a lot of different species that give birth to large litters, including the spotted hyena, for instance. And so they fit this pattern well in that they produce to produce an extra young only imply a small extra investment for the mother. And there is intense sibling competition, and which determines the number of offspring raised, or the number of offspring that survives in the end. We also know that size asymmetry ensures that the most vital young survive. And what are the costs for the mother? Well, the cost is, of course, nursing, which is a direct cost. The cost is also guarding and interacting with the offspring, which means that the sow has less time for resting and feeding. So, and as I will talk a little bit about it later, we will see that the sow starts the investment before the piglets are born. Just to mention this, well, this figure is a little bit old now, but piglet mortality, and then I talk about pre-weaning piglet mortality, not stillborn, but the ones that die that started off as liveborn. We see that there's a lot of variation in pre-weaning mortality among countries. And we are among a few countries that have banned crates since 2000, along with Sweden and Switzerland, I think it is. And most other countries still have, majority have crated sows. So we have a lot of experience on loose housing sows, and since it was banned since 2000, and the correct figures now is that we have a stillborn rate of 7%, which is the average of the Norwegian average for the whole country, and we have a pre-weaning mortality of 12, a little bit more than 12%. Whereas the number of liveborn piglets has increased a lot over the years, and it's the same. I think both Denmark and Norway have a lot of weight in the breeding goal on number of liveborn piglets. But with the new genetic material, with the TN70 sow that we actually managed to wean on average 13 piglets, which is quite good. So there has been a lot of work on sow maternal traits and piglet survival. So if we go back to the sow investment, we have also published quite a lot of work on this topic. And this is an example of a paper where we have looked at trade-offs between litter size and offspring fitness in domestic pigs subjected to different genetic selection pressures. And then we have looked at 3 different breeds because we needed to have some control, and then we used a father breed, which is the Duroc, and we compared this to the crossbred sow that is most represented in our commercial farms, and the Landrace is the mother breed. So the reason why we used the father breed was just to have a comparison with a breed that has not been selected for litter size. Because we find that the selection for increased litter size do not only decrease welfare, or it creates a lot of welfare problems regarding litter competition, maternal investment, and also morphology of the teats, in fact, and how functional the teats become. So it's quite serious. And if we look at this main experiment, where we looked at those 3 breeds, we see that litter size, irrespective of breed, affects most measured parameters, such as nursing success, declines with increasing litter size. Piglets spend more time pre-massaging and post-massaging to ensure future milk production. We see that the intervals between nursings decline, and we see, among others, that piglets tend to monopolize 2 teats more, the upper and lower row. So that also increases the competition. Fewer piglets survive until weaning, and the litter has a larger variety in body weight and a larger variety in weight gain during this entire period. We have larger mortality, and this is caused both by crushing of the mother sow and also starvation. So although we have a high number of liveborn and a lower percentage of mortality, there are still, we still do have a problem with piglets dying because of this litter competition. Yeah, there are some breed effects also, but I don't intend to go into that at the moment. So the next question is, can a super sow be a robust sow? We have high productive sows. They produce a lot of milk and they give birth to huge litters. But which consequences have for the sow? Well, if we look at the 3 breeds that I presented to you, we see that on average, the more the sow invests in the litter, the more they lose in body condition during the lactation period. Also, another problem is that if they invest a lot in a litter, which here is litter investment here is a kilogram pigs, and it includes also dead piglets, also stillborns and the live-born piglets. And then we see that the more they invest in piglets, the more shoulder lesions they develop. It has to be said that the new breed that we have with the TN70 sow have a much lower prevalence of shoulder lesions. So it seems that we have been able to create a more robust sow, and this sow has also been tested in other countries, so that's a positive thing. But I think that the biological system with maternal investment and litter size will still hold for a number of breeds. I don't think that's very special for Norwegian breeds. If you look at the different breeds, we see that the landrace to the right is the one that loses most body condition during the lactation period. The hybrid sows are intermediate, and the Durocs, they are more or less the same as the commercial crossbreds. So the maternal line is the one that invests most and is the one that loses most body condition during the lactation period. We also see that the landrace sow, the mother breed, is the one that has the highest prevalence of shoulder lesions. So that is something that the sow has to pay in order to be able to feed the large litters. So the more behavioral traits, but because it's obvious if you want to go into loose housing of sows at farrowing and lactation, the maternal behavioral traits are really, really crucial. And one trait that is really important is nest building. And this picture is a picture taken from Australia. I was there testing a farrowing pen quite many years ago. Those sows have never been in a loose housing systems before during farrowing and lactation, and the farmer was really curious about how they were going to cope. So this is a pilot version of a Norwegian commercial pen that I have designed myself together with some colleagues. And this picture shows that even though the sow had never had an experience with using nest building material, she was so motivated that she stole straw material from the neighboring pen. So it's obvious that in this respect, nature is quite strong. So that's something that is there from the beginning, and it really works well. But it's not enough to give nest building material to a created sow, because they also need space to perform the nest building behavioral elements. If we look at the period for nest building, the most crucial period, which means the period where we expect the highest effect on production results, because when the sow is able to perform nest building and go through all the elements of nest building, she is likely to be more calm at the time of farrowing. she's also likely to be more motivated to take care of her young. So in Norway, we recommend the farmers to give free access of nest building material at least 12 hours before expected farrowing. And as you see here from the picture, we use hay racks or straw racks so that the sow can pull out what she needs to be satisfied to do nest building. But as I said, it's very important that they have the space to do the behavior that they're motivated for. And this table shows from results from experiments that I did together with Lene Julepedersen in Denmark. And it shows that although crated sows got exactly the same amount of nest building material, we still see more barb biting in the crate, and they spend less time nest building, and they also have more quick flops, which is a behavior that is causing more piglets to be crushed. But we have also looked at, in Norway, we have compared different types of nest building materials. And when comparing peat with long stem straw, straw resulted in a greater variety of nest building behavior elements, increased time spent resting, and reduced incidence of oral stereotypies compared to sows that had access to peat or only sawdust in the pen. During farrowing, sows provided with straw or peat as nest building material show a lower frequency of negative communication towards piglets compared to controls. And straw as nest building material also resulted in a higher proportion of sow-initiated nursing bouts and successful nursing bouts, meaning with milk letdown, than sows in the peat and the control group. We have also found shorter farrowing duration compared to sows provided with peat or no specific material at all. Sawdust or regular litter is not enough. And also the percent of stillborn was lowest in the straw group. So the practical recommendation, as I said, is in Norway that free access to long stem straw at least 12 hours prior to expected parturition. Or if they cannot follow, if it's not so easy for a farmer to see when the sow gets restless and wants to start with nest building, we recommend them to give straw 24 hours before expected farrowing. So, are there more behavioral traits that are of importance that you have to think about when you select good mothers? We have also looked at that. In addition to nest building behavior, which is affecting farrowing duration and the percentage of stillborn piglets, we have also looked at some other traits, among others, how the sow communicate with her young shortly after birth. And that communication we have looked at is outside the time of nursing, because what we've seen in our studies is that the sow communication during nursing or to get the piglets to come to their udder, that doesn't vary that much. It's that communication in between nursings that varies the most. And it says a lot about how motivated the sow is to be attentive towards her young and protect her young. And we also looked at sow carefulness. And in both of the sow communication, sow carefulness, we developed a score from 1 to 4, where 4 was the most motivated, the most careful, and the most the sows that had the most communication with their young. So the aim of the study was to find maternal behavioral traits important for piglet survival, to develop qualitative scores from continuous measures of those traits, and to study the relationship between maternal behavioral scores, piglet mortality, and the number of weaned piglets. First, we did this experimentally with the same type of breeds that I told you about previously. But then we also went out in commercial farms in Norway, and we trained farmers through a scheme. We trained farmers to make these scores themselves when they were in the farm, providing them with feed and cleaning pens and these things. They were asked to do these scores when the sows enter the lying position after they have been fed. These scores were made when they were transferring from an active period into a period where they were trying to find a good resting position and start nursing. So it was the in-between nursings, and from a period where they were active to a period where they try to rest and or nurse. And the results show very clearly that NBA in this table means nest building behavior. Nest building behavior, the ones that scored the highest for nest building behavior, they also had the lowest postnatal mortality. It didn't affect starvation, but the ones that performed most nest building, they had also less, a lower piglet mortality due to crushing, and they weaned significantly more piglets. And if you look at the other scores, which was communication score and carefulness score, we saw that the ones that scored the highest also have significantly lower mortality, also due to crushing, and both crushing and starvation. And now we are actually combining these two latter scores into one score, because it turned out that they were really highly correlated. So it's easier for the farmer to use one score than to use two. Unfortunately, we didn't have enough resources, so we didn't have a new project to calculate heritabilities, because it would be really interesting to put it in a breeding goal. But if someone in the audience or other countries would be interested, we are more than happy to collaborate on that. Another aspect of selection for increased litter size, with the side effect that we get larger and larger sows and longer bodies with more functional teats, or at least more teats, is another thing. It's about the teat morphology. And we do find in all the breeds that not all teats are accessible during the colostrum period, which is quite a disaster for piglets because they need colostrum. And we see from our studies that especially the lower row of teats in the middle and posterior position is not accessible for the piglets. Overall, we found that 22% of the teats are not accessible during day 1 postpartum, which means an even more increased sibling competition for the access to teats. Here the symbols mean TPD means teat pair distance, which was the most important. It's the distance between the upper and lower row of teats, as you see from the picture above. We also measured teat length and teat diameter, which didn't mean so much and didn't affect nursing success that much. So, but teat pair distance is really important to measure, because the larger they get and the heavier they get, the distance between the upper and lower row becomes larger, and then in the end, the lower teat row is hidden towards the floor and they cannot access it. So that's also a very serious consequence of selection for high productivity that you should be aware of. When we talk about farrowing environment, we also have to think about which environment do we select sows in, because of course, since we've had loose housing since 2000, we do get an indirect selection for maternal behavior traits because we select sows that do well in the system. Here we see the crates to the left and some examples of loose-housed, individually loose-housed sows in farrowing pens in the middle, and also the other, maybe more extreme in the natural environment to keep them outdoors. And we do now see that it's not we do not have any really good arguments to confine the sows anymore, because we have systems and we actually have sows that produce really big litters, and they do really well in farrowing pens. However, I would say that for an outdoor system, and also I will come back to group housing of lactating sows, we see a much bigger variation in production results, because those systems, they may work well, but the variation between sows becomes larger, and the variation in piglet mortality is also much, much larger. And that's the reason why most Norwegian farmer is not choosing this system anymore. Those are pictures from the Netherlands, where they have a communal feeding area and dunging area, and they also have straw-bedded open access farrowing pens. So it's a very nice system, but in reality, I think that for an average farmer, it's difficult to make it really work with good production results. Or at least it has to be farmers that are really motivated to follow up on individual variation. This is an example of some farrowing pens that are quite often used in Norway. We do have a lot of alternatives, but this is to the left is a typical pen. And the pens that are getting more and more popular in Norway is the pens that are built from birth until 30 kilograms. So when they are weaned at 28 days, the sows are taken out of the pens, but the pigs are able to, or they are allowed to stay in their home environment. However, as I also work with weaned pigs and finishing pigs, we have a project on finishing pigs now. I would say that I would not prefer to have it until slaughter. I think it works really well from birth until 30 kilograms, but then again, pens are much larger than just the farrowing pens. So it's of course, it's a discussion of priorities. Finally, I'd just like to say something about the pen that I and some colleagues of mine have developed, first in Norway. And the idea was to develop a pen that stimulates the mother to behave in a good way so that we have a low piglet mortality by providing her with elements in that pen that makes her feel confident, makes her feel safe and comfortable during farrowing and also during nursing and before farrowing. By provision of hay racks, we have rubber mats in the resting area. We have slatted floor area and a threshold between the nest area and the activity area. And the most controversial part of this pen was that we didn't have any separate creep area, because we wanted to encourage positive interaction with the sows and the piglets. And we tested this in Norway and in Australia, this first pilot version. And then we have further developed it into a commercial type of pen. And this is the picture from that. And here you see that we have a closed nest area, and it's a rubber mat on top, but it's underneath the concrete. It's we have a system where we can have increase the temperature in the floor. We have floor heating in two zones. One where underneath the sow at the time of farrowing, that can be shut, that can be closed, and then we keep floor heating during underneath the piglets in the short side of the nest area, as you see from the picture. And then we have plastic platted floors. And then we have tested this pen in some commercial farms. And it's now published in the journal Agriculture in 2022. And among others, we have compared a traditional pen, one out of many in Norway, and compared the sow. We call it the sow comfort pen because of the aim is, of course, to create a pen that satisfies the behavioral need of the sow and make her comfortable to be able to take care of her young. And we tested these two pens in 2 commercial farms. And what we found was that we have a lower mortality in the sow comfort pen than in the traditional pen, not regarding percentage of piglets being overlain, but mortality overall. And we did find a smaller proportion of pigs in the new type of pen. We found a lower proportion of starved piglets. And this is largely due to a better communication between mother and young in this pen. And the second farm, the mortality of live-born piglets was reduced from more than 15% in the first batch to less than 12% in the 7th batch. So it was important for the farmer to get training in the new type of pen system. We also saw that by provision of rubber mat in the sow comfort pen versus there was no rubber mat in the traditional pen, just concrete and a small layer of sawdust on the resting area. And then we saw that the percentage of piglets in the litter without lesions on carpal joints were higher in the sow comfort pen with rubber mats than the pen that didn't have it. Also, we saw a better communication initiated by the sow with her young in the sow comfort pen than in a traditional pen. And that was measured as a number of interactions with sniffing and grunting between sows and their piglets, but initiated by the sow. And interestingly, we also saw that the multipair sow did really well in the system, because usually primipair sows do better, but their multipair sows actually did really well. So to sum up, we have to go back to answering those initial questions. I think I have to say and conclude that to satisfy behavioral needs during confinement is not possible, and thus crates or semi-crated systems should be banned altogether. While a good pen design forms an important basis for producing high-quality litters, please keep in mind that it is the sow maternal traits and the management practices that has the largest impact on production results. This is also why we always keep track on side effects of selection and make sure why you should always make track of that and make sure that breeding programs include traits that increases robustness and longevity of the sows. And artificial rearing is not a good alternative to being reared and nursed by the sow, as it impairs behavior, welfare and growth of the piglets. So if you have the choice, it's better for the mother to raise the piglets and feed them. So if I'm going to say something about the best practice around the time of farrowing, I can sum it up in a few points and say that it's extremely important that the sow has access to nest building material around 24 hours before expected parturition. The pen should be clean and there should be a generous amount of litter at the time of farrowing. And the sows that are doing a great job themselves should be left as much in peace as possible, I think. And especially we see that gills usually do really well. So why then we don't have to do anything. But I would still advise people to be present at the time of farrowing, because you can help in near crushing events and prevent near crushing events. And you can also observe sows that have birth problems and these things. And cross-fostering is used as a routine of larger piglets if some piglets do not get access to a teat, but should not be practiced if the sow can feed the entire litter, I would say. And that was all from me. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Inger. It's a great pleasure to listen and learn from you, because we are just with little short time. We are just asking a few questions, just one right now. Thank you for making the switch in the camera. Okay. How do you view temporary creating farrow systems?
I'm sorry?
How do you view, what is your perspective about temporary creating farrow systems?
I have said many, many years ago on a European meeting, and I don't believe in it for a second, because it makes the farmer really confused. And we also had a transition period in Norway where they just opened up the crates and still used as very small pens. They just took away the confinement facilities, and then it didn't work at all. I mean, we see the same history in chicken as well, or in hens with enriched cages and all these things. We need to open up more. So I would really encourage you to go straight to individual loose house sows instead of having some semi-confinement. It's just gonna force the farmers to pay more, because they will want to change after that. Yeah, I think I would not encourage it.
Thank you so much. It's really important, your point of view on this. And thank you so much for your presentation. It was pretty amazing.